Welcome and hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Zach Harmon, and you are listening to the TruStrength Spotlight podcast, where we are bringing you a collaborative approach to health and fitness. This podcast is for anyone who's interested in optimizing their health and fitness, but with a little spin. We bring experts in the health and fitness field to discuss how collaboration with other professionals help optimize the health of the people they work with.
Hey everyone, this is another series of TruStrength Spotlight. I have a special guest with Loren Cruz with Innate Nutrition. She's a nutritionist I personally have worked with, but she's been a great referral source for my patients as well. I'm really excited to get started with asking her some questions because she's got plenty of knowledge that she can share. Loren, go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of let everyone know what your business is about.
Thanks for having me, Zach. I primarily, my focus is helping people heal their metabolisms. A lot of people think metabolism is only about aesthetics, but the metabolism is actually huge for health, vitality, and so I help people heal their metabolisms to then help heal their other issues, because usually when you can heal your metabolism, you can heal your whole self. So focusing on that, I work with both men and women. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, so I use real food as medicine, and I, work to respect the bioindividuality of each person. Not everything is going to work for everyone, and everyone, needs a different food strategy. Different supplements are going to work for people. People lead different lives, so they're going to have different lifestyle changes as well. And I'm also a root cause protocol consultant. So I am able to send out for hair tissue mineral analysis, which is really awesome because what most people don't realize is, there's a lot of focus on hormones and hormonal health, but actually right below that is minerals. And minerals are what help hormones run. So if you go a little further down, we can help balance your minerals, balance your hormones and then balance your metabolism. So trying to go to the root cause of things and attack it from there for long-term results.
Awesome. And give the audience a little bit more information about describe a little bit what functional nutritionist means. Like, what does that mean? How would you describe that if someone's never heard that term before?
Yeah. Word nutritionist is not really, there's a lot of gray area. Functional nutrition is a way to describe probably like a holistic approach to nutrition. So it's not just macros, which I do, but it's more about the food, the person, the individuality of the person, and what their body needs. So, and using food as medicine as well. So I always try to use food over supplements if I can. And it's not just about the numbers that you're trying to hit per day. It's about how you feel and what foods are going to make you vibrant and vital. Because, each of us has something different we're working on. A person that's working on their acne is going to be different from a person working on their blood pressure, is going to be different from a person working on their gallbladder issues. So using different foods to support those different issues, as well as, the foundational approach to food and nutrition.
Yeah. And if you had like a pyramid, right, how would you describe like, where's macros, where's micros, where's minerals? Like, where should people focus more? Maybe your take's a little different than some of what other people have heard. How would you kind of like organize that for people in general?
That's a good question. So I guess first, what a lot of people are missing is food. We're pretty much in this epidemic of like hypometabolism. So it's pretty much a slow metabolism, and people with slow metabolisms can suffer from anything from, infertility to more serious issues. It just manifests in different ways. And so if you're not meeting your body's, first and foremost need, Maslow's triangle, for example, nutrition and food is at the base of the triangle. we have to get there first. So we have to just make sure we're fueling ourselves in the first place. Then we can start to play with the quality of the food. So, the ratios of macros, fats, proteins, carbohydrates, but also paying attention to the quality that you're putting into your body and making sure that it has enough micros. A calorie is not a calorie, as many people would argue with me about this, but the kind of fats that you eat are going to matter. The kind of carbohydrates you eat are going to matter. A potato is going to be digested very differently than a fruit. Olive oil or canola oil is going to be digested very differently than saturated fat. And, dairy, high quality meat is going to be digested very differently than, say, a plant source like beans. They're all going to have a really different impact on your metabolism, which is basically the speed at which you can create energy. It's a kind of an art in a sense, but you got to make sure you have food first. You're fueling yourself, and food frequency matters. A lot of people go too long without eating. They're into this. They're into this fast. I mean, I used to too. I used to do it inadvertently, and until I realized, I actually have hypoglycemia all the time. And so once you can start fueling yourself, you can calm the body down, and then you can start giving and focusing on the quality and tweaking that way. But you have to, food frequency is really the most important thing, and then you can focus on the quality, which can, set you up for even more results.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll share a little bit of with not right? So like she's talking about food frequency. I think when you talk about metabolisms being affected, whether that is not being fast enough or too fast, let's talk about how stress is a big role, and stress comes in many forms, but speak a little bit to the audience about why chronic stress is such a big deal, and how does that really impact our ability to absorb nutrients and other things?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And a lot of us don't realize that we are stuck in this chronically stressed state because many of us are kind of numb to it. Cortisol is...
It becomes normal, right? You don't even know.
Yeah.
That's your normal.
It's very true. I personally was stuck there for 1 to 2 years, and I didn't even realize it. But I was go. And so, a lot of us are stuck in this chronically stressed state. We can't really come out of it. We start our day with an alarm clock that, wakes us up. It's blaring, and we already have this, huge cortisol spike. And cortisol is the main stress hormone that's released. Adrenaline is too, but adrenaline's more short term. And when you're in a chronically stressed state, it's cortisol, the one that's pumping out most of the time. So you start your day with a glaring alarm clock, and then maybe you skip breakfast because you're in a rush.
And then
to
you
get
do
to
coffee.
Work. You do coffee. Yeah, because you're tired.
Yep.
And then you white knuckle drive. I mean, maybe not right now, but a lot of people white knuckle drive their way to work. Maybe they grab a bagel or something from the office kitchen. They have more coffee, and then they skip lunch because they work through it. Then it's 1 or 2 p.m. and they're starving, and they're feeling really tired.
Tired, and then they binge eat.
Yeah, and then we binge eat, and then we feel even more tired because we're oh my God, this is too overwhelming. There's so much food that just comes in and just puts us to sleep. And then we have our 3 p.m. crash. We go for more coffee. Then we're oh my God, I have been so stressed all day. I'm going to go work out. And then I need this.
It sounds too familiar.
I need this. And so, maybe you get to the gym, you're really tired, but you're trying to amp yourself up. And then you do your workout, you make it through, you feel good. But then you go home and you finally have dinner, maybe, a couple drinks, and then you start the whole process all over again. Stress is really hard to come out of if we don't have the right foundational principles in place, especially food. So, I talked about food being one of Maslow's foundations, and it's your one of the top 5 survival needs. If you don't give your body what it needs, it's going to retaliate in some way, whether that's food, shelter, water, etc. It's going to compensate, and when you compensate, it's going to slow down the metabolism. So, it's a it's a long battle that all of us fight. But if you can just start to make small changes, like nutritional changes, for example, that's the easiest way to take yourself out of a stress state, because food itself can take you out of and suppress the cortisol response. When you are hypoglycemic, your body releases cortisol, which is a glucocorticoid. That stands for, basically, it's a sugar, a sugar hormone that releases sugar into the body. So it releases sugar into the body, and it tries to suppress the stress response. But anytime you engage, that response, the cortisol response, you are raising and pushing yourself more into the stress state. And that's what we call the sympathetic state. It's the fight or flight state. So, anytime you skip breakfast or don't eat for long periods of time, your body's engaging that stress system, and it's going to release stress hormones, whether or not you feel it, because it is a very...
Yeah, you don't. I would say you don't. Most people aren't feeling it, right? I didn't feel it. I thought that was normal. It's like the first time you try coffee, right? You're like, oh my God, you feel euphoric, you're jittery. And then as you do it more, that becomes normal. And now you don't get that same feeling. It doesn't mean it isn't doing something to me, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's the same thing with the chemicals we release in our blood. If you do it chronically, how do you even know you're doing it anymore?
Right. And cortisol is a hell of a drug. I'll talk about that in a second. But, if you're not feeding yourself, you're constantly releasing these stress hormones, whether you feel it or not, and you're breaking down muscle tissue, you're breaking down fat tissue, and you do want to break down fat, yes, but this is not the state you want to break it down in, because you usually have more inflammatory proteins that make up your muscles. You have more inflammatory fats that make up your fat cells, and so you're releasing all these inflammatory fat tissues and muscle tissues into your bloodstream. You are suppressing your liver's ability to convert thyroid hormone. So that's why we see a lot of people with, people that are chronically stressed have chronic thyroid issues as well, or it turns into that. You can't detoxify well. So a lot of people that are stressed also have estrogen dominance. And so, just by feeding yourself the right way at the right time, you can really stave off a lot of stress. That's like the number one way you yourself can control stress, because you're not going to be able to control what your boss says to you. You're not going to be able to control what your kid does. If he breaks something, and that's another stressor. You're not going to be able to control the maniac driving next to you on the highway, but you can control when you feed yourself and with what. So that's like the number one thing. And I said I would talk about cortisol. So cortisol, when you're in a chronic stress state, cortisol is a hormone and adrenaline as well, but these are the two hormones that are released to help you run from a bear. So it's like a very primal response, very primal hormones. And so they help you run from a bear, but in doing that, they bring all the blood into the center of your body. So your extremities are not getting that much blood. So it constricts your blood flow. It suppresses your digestion. So you're not going to be making as much hydrochloric acid to digest your food. You're not going to be making as many digestive enzymes to digest that food and break it down even more and get the nutrition you need from it. So you can end up malnourished, even if you're,
even if you are eating proper. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so it also, this stress response also has, our body has negative feedback systems. So if we're in a stress state, we are not going to be making as much testosterone. We are not going to be making as much progesterone. We're not going to be making as much thyroid hormone, because our body's going to be focused on making cortisol. And so when catabolic hormones go up, and cortisol and adrenaline are catabolic means breakdown, it's a reductive state, your anabolic hormones will go down. So it's just like this and this. It's a lever.
You can't do both. I mean,
you cannot do both.
Body, yeah.
Yep. So it's built into our DNA. It's the way we survive and adapt. But it's our body's doing this to protect us. But sometimes we inadvertently put ourselves in that state too, which is unfortunate, and we don't realize.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think as a society, maybe viewing work stress or even exercise stress, or instead of always looking at them as harmless, it still is that the analogy I like to use with my patients when I'm working with them from a rehab standpoint is the stress bucket analogy, where your bucket is the size it is. It is what it is. And quite frankly, as we get older, right, the bucket might even shrink a little bit. We might not be able to tolerate the same stressors when we were 20 as we are when we're 60. And so that recovery piece that you're talking about, which is eating better, sleeping better, taking the time to reduce the amount of stress that you do put in there, plus the recovery component, I think that is a good analogy to kind of speak to kind of how we would address someone with food and lifestyle changes, right?
Yeah. And my mentor has this really great analogy. You know, going to work out after getting a really crappy night's sleep is like stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what we do every day, day in and day out. And that's what, you know, depletes our health bank account. So we are constantly taking money in. We really have to be cognizant of the money that we're putting into our bank account. So are we setting ourselves up for health? Because if we're not, and we keep, you know, deducting, we're going to end up with a problem, and it's going to be really crappy.
Yeah. I mean, working with you, if no one knows, I've worked with her personally because I've had my own fair share of stuff I wanted to work on. But one thing that she kind of made me realize was I had to earn my intense workout days. It's not, I get to do them whenever I want and however I want. Because if I do, well, I may have the side effect of high blood pressure. I might have the side effect of feeling tired, or maybe my blood work is a little off. So there's consequences to high intensity without some kind of oversight of how many times you do that, right? It's not sustainable to train 5-6 days a week hard. Maybe 1 or 2 days a week if you properly fueled, and then the other ones should be more, you know, moderate intensity, if not mild intensity. But I think people have to think of it as a balancing act more than if I work harder, I get better results. It doesn't
Right.
always, what do they say? More is not better, better is better.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. A lot of us, you know, working out is like our church, and I get it. It's my church too. But you know, it's also got its own. If you're not preparing your body for it, if you haven't saved enough in your health bank account, you know, you working out can actually do the reverse. It can suppress your thyroid. It can suppress your immune system. It can suppress a lot of things. And it can drive us further and further into that stress state unless we are, you know, taking care of ourselves and we have a really good foundational way to get out of that stress state. So yeah, it's definitely, workouts must be earned, especially the high intensity ones and super heavy lifting days. But that doesn't mean you can't. You just have to be more self-aware.
Yep. Now that we've kind of laid the foundation of understanding stress a little bit, I did want to go into diets a little bit because a lot of people hear about them, and I think we should address them, especially with some of the misconceptions.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would say, you know, you've got your ketogenic diet, you have your vertical diet, your carnivore diet. Speak a little bit about why so I get this often from patients, right? And you can speak to the science behind this a little bit. They'll be like, I tried the carnivore diet for 21 days and I felt amazing. I didn't even feel like I needed coffee. Like I felt so clear-minded, and I felt like I could have just kept doing that forever. And I was so productive.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit how that actually isn't necessarily good health, because this was a shocker to me about the science behind this, because I've personally tried ketogenic diet. I haven't tried the carnivore, but I've tried the ketogenic diet, and I didn't have to drink coffee when I was on it. But
Yep.
looking back, now that I know what I know, speak a little bit about why that necessarily isn't good health.
Yes. Thanks for that. That's a great question. So yeah, well, it all comes down to diets are diets. And any diet is not going to serve the person. It's going to serve the diet. You know, this is the structure, and you must follow this without any regard to the person and, you know, where they came from, what they're going through, their life, work schedule, their personal food, maybe battles, or what they can eat, what they cannot eat, depending on allergies and tolerance and all these things. So the carnivore diet and the keto diet are very similar in the way they work. They all push you into more of the sympathetic fight or flight state. And that's why it feels so good, because cortisol is a hell of a drug, like I said before. You're running on adrenaline, you're running on cortisol, and basically stimulating the stress state. So I can explain that a little bit. So with the keto diet, you're eating very, very little carbs, and that's where it starts. Glucose is the number one preferred fuel source for the body. So anytime you deprive it of glucose, it's going to stimulate that fight or flight response. So it's going to break down muscle tissue and fat via gluconeogenesis, which is not an optimal, it's a survival. Basically, it's a backup system. It's the generator. And so anytime, you engage that, you're releasing stress hormones. And you can't do this for a long time. I read a study that, basically you can do keto for 1 week, and after that, it will give you obesity and diabetes. Yeah. That's kind of like, there's like maybe a one week reset point. And like, yes, if you're coming from the standard American diet, which is also called the SAD diet, you might have a lot more benefits. You're eating real food, you're getting healthy fats in, hopefully. You're getting in saturated fats, which are my favorite, the most pro-metabolic. But the keto diet itself, it's very devoid in minerals. You are putting yourself more and more into that stress state. So the reason you feel so good is because you're running on adrenaline and cortisol, and that's why you don't need coffee, because you're running on stress hormones. And it might take a couple months or even a year for you to feel the breakdown, but it will happen. And a lot of people also feel like the people that try it, they're like, oh, my autoimmune conditions went away, or my symptoms. And it's because the cortisol and adrenaline, they suppress the immune system. So it's really just masking.
You won't feel it. Yeah, it's masking the symptoms.
Masking the issue. It's not fixing it. And likely when it breaks down, you're going to come out of the other side in a worse state than you already were. So I highly don't recommend the keto diet for that reason, is because it just puts us more in the stress state. We already have so many stressors. If you're doing the keto diet, you're intermittent fasting, and you're doing CrossFit, you are driving yourself into the ground. You will end up with a thyroid issue, probably an autoimmune issue.
Well, and probably some, I would imagine injuries would occur because you're not going to be able to recover as fast.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where that's where kind of me and you having the team approach together, I think has been helpful. Is there's sometimes I know with tendon pain or some other types of pains that I get with patients, that if they don't address their lifestyle behaviors with their diet and some of the sleep issues that they have, that they will not get better with the injury that I'm trying to rehab, right? So I think having you being able to help them through that will only yield better results with that. But the one question with the ketogenic diet that I think a lot of people are probably listening right now, and they're like, well, I lost a lot of weight. Isn't that healthy? I lost 40 pounds, and that helped my joints and it helped my low back, and it helped me just feel better overall. I guess speak a little bit, because this is where it gets tough, right? So losing weight from a health standpoint is probably going to reduce the amount of load going through all our joints. So a lot of their aches and pains probably will feel better from losing the weight. But speak a little bit about how fat's a little maybe more satiating, and that's why they might be in a calorie deficit with losing weight.
Yeah, there's a couple parts to it. Somebody might lose weight. You could still lose weight and be stressed. Stress will definitely still burn a lot of calories, but it's the short-term gain versus the long-term gain. Do you want long-term health or short-term weight loss? And so by doing a ketogenic diet, your lower back feels good because it's probably the cortisol and adrenaline that are also suppressing your immune system. They're helping you. They basically like numb your body and help you keep yourself running from that bear. So those are the hormones. When we were back in old times, caveman times, those were the hormones that let us run from the bear. Yes, we stepped on a twig, or we hit our foot on a rock, but we could keep running because we have the adrenaline and cortisol running through us. And so kind of like numbs us, and it'll take a little bit of time to come out of it. And you might notice that, okay, I feel good, but now I'm re-injuring myself constantly. And that's kind of where you'll start to see things break down. Yes, fats are amazing and they're satiating, but glucose, again, it's our number one primary fuel source. And so anytime we deprive the body of it, we're, again, pushing ourselves more into that sympathetic state. And a couple things that some people don't realize is that, fats, the kind of fats that we eat are really important, and the kind of fats that we've eaten until this time are really important. Our body is more likely to burn saturated fat. It's more likely to store polyunsaturated fats. So when we become fat burners, we are letting all of these crappy fats come back into our bloodstream. We get insulin resistance because all the fatty acids are blocking the insulin receptors on our cells. So a lot of people on keto end up with fatty liver. A lot of people on keto, well, most people, if not all, they are insulin resistant. And if they went on keto for insulin resistance, they've made that insulin resistance worse because they've deprived the body of its primary fuel source, and all these fatty acids are blocking insulin's ability to get sugar into the cell. A lot of them, they wake up with really high blood sugar. I don't know if anyone tracks that might be listening.
I mean, a lot of them might be because they, a lot of times people will be measuring their ketones, but with that same machine, they can track their blood sugar as well.
Yeah. So blood sugar, a lot of people wake up with a lot of blood sugar. That's because they're already running on adrenaline. The liver is what stores glycogen, and that's the body's battery pack. And anytime it's devoid or empty, it's going to break down muscle tissue fat to create its own glucose. But this is not the ideal form. You need to keep that liver full of glycogen. And so, a lot of people also end up on the keto diet with the inability to digest carbohydrates. Gut flora is like, basically, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so they're like, I feel so bloated when I eat starches now. And I don't know, it doesn't feel good. That's because you completely lost the ability to digest carbohydrates. And so when, trying to transition back into eating carbs, they have to go very, very, very slow because their body's just completely lost its ability to process glucose and carbohydrates. And so they're insulin resistant and they can't even digest it. So it's got to be really slow and really targeted.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Before I knew anything about nutrition, me and Britt tried the ketogenic diet for quite some time, and Britt got skinny, I got skinny. Like, we definitely lost some weight. And what was interesting was when Christmas time came back around, we wanted to stop doing it, right? We wanted to go back to eating normal food because during the holidays, it's almost impossible to not have a carb.
Yeah.
What was weird was we both ate carbs, and we obviously were not prepared to digest those. And we had all kinds of, heavy carb meals, and it almost felt like we were drunk. Like, after we ate them, like, it felt like we had drank alcohol, even though we hadn't. We felt intoxicated almost, like, it was definitely like a weird high feeling when we both ate the heavy carbs after when we came back from the ketogenic diet, which was, I was like, man, I should not have done that. But it was like, I had no idea at the time. But speaking a little bit of what you were saying, you have to go slow.
Yeah.
If you don't, it does not feel good.
It doesn't feel good, and you'll gain a lot of weight.
Yes.
So yeah, and it's you'll also suppress your thyroid. So you're suppressing your thyroid the entire time that you're on a ketogenic diet. So temperature is a really good way to tell this. If you're not between 97.8 and 98.6, people on keto are likely in the 97, 96. So your body is like probably a little struggle bus. The carnivore diet is also kind of similar. Protein, so it's mainly protein, very little fiber. Fiber is actually, I think, over exaggerated. We don't need that much, but protein itself, if you don't have a carbohydrate to pair it up with, carbs spare protein. So when we eat protein itself, it has just as much of an insulin response as carbs. So we are, basically causing this huge insulin spike. Our body lowers our blood sugar so much so that it needs to re-engage the stress hormones to raise it back up. And so we're like constantly like this. And it's just as bad. We're putting ourselves in a very stressed state in a very unstable way. And there's also some downsides as well to carnivore diets. It could be helpful and healing for somebody coming from a plant-based diet, for example. They really need those amino acids and proteins. They really need those healthy animal fats because there's no replacement for healthy animal fats and animal protein. But carnivore people tend to eat a lot of muscle meat. And so we used to come from this place where we ate nose to tail, and nose to tail means, organs, joints, ligaments, anything, we ate the whole animal. And that was for a good reason, because different parts of the animal have different ratios of proteins, and muscle meats have the most inflammatory kinds of proteins. Dairy, for example, has amazing proteins that are really anti-inflammatory. Gelatin, bone broth, collagen. That's why you see these all coming. These are the kind of ones that I actually really believe in and would recommend to clients, is the collagen and gelatin. They have amazing proteins that help us detoxify. They're really great for bone health. But people on the carnivore diet tend to eat a lot of muscle meat. And so when we do that, muscle meat is really high in phosphorus. And phosphorus is basically the antagonist to calcium in the blood. And so when phosphorus is too high in the blood, our body will actually break down our bones to release calcium into the blood to neutralize our blood. And so there can be a lot of calcification, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and there's a whole other set of problems with that. Again, it's a diet. It's not for you specifically. So there's some downsides as well. But I will say, we are more carnivorous than omnivorous. So I do really believe in high quality animal protein.
Yeah. And with the carnivore diet, do you think a lot of that stress response that occurs there, like obviously you're depriving the body of glucose, you're depriving the body of glucose in the carnivore diet as well, but the body does have a way to convert protein to glucose, right, through glucogenesis. Is that very costly from an energy standpoint? Is that very costly for us to use? Is that only meant to help us when we're in dire need, or is that something our body can do easily? Yeah,
that's the fighter, or the backup, the generator, the second system, secondary system. So they're the bench. But glucose is the team on the field, and gluconeogenesis is the bench. And you do not want to engage gluconeogenesis unless you absolutely have to. That is the survival state. And so when we're engaging the system, we are basically telling our body, okay, burn or store. If you want to keep the burning, your metabolism up going, you need to have carbs. If you want to store it, if you don't, you're going to store it. You're basically signaling to your body. You're telling your body store. Or when you have a metabolic meal with carbohydrates, animal proteins, and a little fat, that's burn. Same thing goes with the kinds of foods you eat as well. I can go more into that, but like nuts and seeds, those are hibernation foods. When you engage this system, you're telling your body, hibernate. And it just does not, it's not pro-metabolic. It's going to suppress your thyroid. It's going to suppress your detoxification, your immune system. It's not a good thing to be in a long time. Yeah.
Another thing I would love you to touch a little bit on, I know it's going to be hard to touch every base on it, but speak a little bit about how important it is to get vitamin D, but from sunlight, and how vitamin D supplementation can actually be very problematic and something that people probably shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, vitamin D is it's a hot supplement especially right now, because a lot of people are freaking out. They're like, oh, vitamin D, and a lot of doctors are recommending it. You know, I definitely can't tell you to not take something your doctor told you to told you to take, but honestly, vitamin D, I think it hasn't been looked into as deeply as it should be, because if you take any mineral or hormone, it's a hormone. Vitamin, mineral, or hormone on its own, it has nothing to oppose it, and there's no vitamin or mineral that works on its own on this earth. So if you're not using it in its natural way that it should be used, there's going to be some consequences, whether or not you realize it or not. It could be long term, it could be short term. But vitamin D's, I personally only like to get it from sunlight. It's when we get it from sunlight, it makes cholesterol sulfate, which is actually the compound that is supposedly the one that's most heart protective. It's not, you know, it's not the vitamin D supplement. It's cholesterol sulfate that you create from sun exposure underneath your skin. And so getting it from sunlight is getting it naturally. And, you know, there's definitely some things that could be problematic for your vitamin D creation, synthesis, and absorption. Just to name a few, you know, where you live, your distance from the equator, the color of your skin, melanin can naturally, you know, the darker you are, though, it's kind of a protective mechanism. The darker you get, the less you absorb, because your body's trying to protect you from calcification. So, as well as, you know, sunscreen, pesticides, actually. There's a pesticide called glyphosate, and it's basically in everything. It's called Roundup, actually. That's the market name. But it's sprayed on most conventional crops, and, you know, it's in your bread, cereals, vegetables. This actually, not only does it suppress the synthesis of vitamin D, but it also depletes us of glycine, which we need for bone health. So it's a 2-for-1 kind of problem. But yeah, there's a couple others. I have a huge blog post that I wrote on my website, but there's a couple blockers for vitamin D synthesis. But taking vitamin D, for example, orally through supplementation, a lot of doctors over prescribe, in my opinion. They give you like mega dose vitamin D supplements. They're like, take 10,000 IUs, take 50,000 IUs. That's insane, because basically you're calcifying yourself from the inside out. When you take vitamin D, but to make vitamin D, and there's 2 types. So you have storage, and then you have active. You create vitamin D, you store it, and then when you need it, you activate it to then go let it do its thing in your body. And that could be helping with your immune system, etc. But all of those steps, from creating storage to activating it, they all require magnesium. And that's actually where a lot of people, you know, are deficient in. Truly, it's not vitamin D, it's magnesium. So like a lot of people are like,
they can't get their storage to go to active, right?
Yeah.
It's essentially what you're saying is without magnesium, you can't do that.
Yeah, or they can't even synthesize storage. You know, they're so magnesium deficient that it's just like cholesterol. That's just not getting used because they don't have enough magnesium to make storage D. So, and this happens to a lot of people. They're like, oh, I get a lot of sunlight. Like, I don't understand why, you know, I have vitamin D, it's low. Like, that was actually me in my teens. My doctor was like, you're low in vitamin D. I'm like, what? I've been outside all summer. Like, look at me, I'm tan. But no, it's a magnesium issue in you know, hindsight. So you need a lot of magnesium to create storage vitamin D and then to activate it. And then, you know, supplemental vitamin D, you're just taking the storage form. You're not even taking the active form. So you're taking these mega doses of vitamin D, just putting it into storage, and then you don't have enough to convert to active because you're totally magnesium deficient from trying to synthesize or process the storage D. And you know, there's another problem too. It's calcification. So vitamin D regulates the availability of calcium. It liberates calcium. It doesn't actually, like, you need vitamin K to put it in the bones where it needs to go. So when you take these mega doses of vitamin D, you're liberating calcium, and
it may go where you don't want it to go.
Exactly. A lot of us are vitamin K deficient already, and so we are basically causing calcification of our soft tissues, which can be really problematic because, we already are so calcified from a lot of other things in our lives. There's a lot of acids that we drink. There's a lot of exercises that we do that could cause calcification. Calcification can naturally happen. So, we're just adding that on top of that. And then also, there's another thing. Vitamin D also suppresses vitamin A. So vitamin A, and I mean real vitamin A, not beta carotene. Like a lot of people get this wrong. There's like 12 steps to make vitamin A from beta carotene. And a lot of us have a gene that don't even allow us to do that. It's like 50% of the population. So, beta carotene is not going to pay dividends. You need real vitamin A, retinol. And so when you take supplemental D, you suppress vitamin A. You actually need vitamin A to activate vitamin D. So you're just taking all this storage D, and you're not going to be able to activate it at the end of the day.
Well, and that's why you're seeing some of these physicians who are a little bit more educated on this stuff. You'll see the vitamin D prescribed with vitamin A, retinol. Mm-hmm. I've seen some of that going on. But it would be interesting to see when it shifts to, hey, maybe we should look at magnesium.
Yeah. But also, you don't want to be supplementing. Sorry.
Yeah, you'd rather eat it from food.
Yeah, A is something, it can get really iffy when you supplement it because the sources it can be really iffy, and you can actually really easily cause toxicity. Not when you're getting natural vitamin A, from food sources, but vitamin A supplements can be not so great, and they're just generally something you want to stay away from if you can. So, I'm fruit first, sun first person.
What are some easy foods that could get you vitamin A or magnesium since we're naturally deficient? What would you recommend for food wise?
So food, vitamin A, beef liver is going to be your best friend. That's like the top source of vitamin A you can find. Grass fed, if you can do it.
Now, if people hate liver and they can't do it, would you say, what would you recommend for that?
Well, you can make pate. I know a couple people that just like freeze it and then cut it up into little chunks and then just down it. I'm not to that point yet, but you can also take desiccated beef liver capsules, which are the powdered form, basically freeze dried and put into capsule form. That's still going to be great for you. It won't be as potent as like natural, full form beef liver, but it's definitely going to be a really great source of vitamin A and so many other minerals and vitamins. So it's like a multivitamin in my opinion. But because the liver, it's so often thought of as like a filter, and like, oh, you don't want to eat liver because it's toxic. No, it's not that. It basically just stores a bunch of vitamins and minerals so that it can send it off to do things around the body. So it's going to be the most mineral and vitamin rich organ. It's not actually a filter. And so it's so beneficial. Our ancestors used to eat a lot of organs, and it's just something, if you can get yourself to eat it, your body's going to thank you in many ways. Another source of vitamin A, you have eggs, you have some fish, pasture raised and wild if you can. You have dairy if you can tolerate it. It's a great source of vitamin A. Milk, cottage cheese, yogurt, hard cheeses, soft cheeses. And then
what about magnesium?
Magnesium is different.
A little tougher, right?
Magnesium is different because our main source of it, hundreds of years ago, used to be our water. And that was the main source. You can get some from food, but not really a great amount. Not enough that you're going to be able to meet your, magnesium needs daily. So, and because our water is so processed, a lot has happened to our water. It's kind of a mess. And if you want to check out the status of your tap water in your local area, you can go to Environmental Working Group, tap water database. Just take a look, type in your zip code, and you'll see what comes up. It's not fun to look at, but Anyway, regardless of that, our water is processed or completely stripped of minerals. You have distilled water. Spring water is like, doesn't really have it has too many acids in it to really get you that magnesium benefit. So I personally supplement with it in many different ways. And I use magnesium bicarbonate, which is the form that we used to get in our water. I'll put that in my water every day. I will take some mineral drops too in my water or my adrenal cocktail, which I know you like.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I'll spray it on my skin. So, it used to be in our water, so that means we used to bathe in it too. And so, taking a bath, a magnesium foot bath with magnesium chloride flakes. You can spray magnesium chloride oil on your skin if you have sore muscles. So, I kind of just see where the day goes and get a bunch of different ways at the end of the day by the time the day is over. But, drinking magnesium first and foremost is great. You can get some from dark leafy green vegetables.
Why are we thinking like spinach, or are we saying more like kale?
Kale, spinach might have some, but collard greens, what else? I'm blanking. But
and what's a recommended dose that would you want people to shoot for? Like, I'm sure there's not an agreed upon dosage, but I'm sure there's some guidelines there.
Yeah. So it's 5 times your body weight in milligrams. And so I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, I take magnesium, and it's like 250 milligrams once a day, and they weigh 200 pounds. And that's just not enough for your body weight, especially if you're an athlete. Magnesium is the first mineral to get burned in any time of stress. So we are more stressed. We experience more stress in one day than our ancestors ever did in their lifetime. So like, we are dumping magnesium. Our magnesium burn rate is what we like to call it at the root cause protocol. Our magnesium burn rate is phenomenally high. So we need to be constantly replenishing it. And that's why it sounds ridiculous, but it's very much needed.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is now more than ever, I think people often think if they exercise harder, they become more resilient or have better health because they exercise. But they have to really think about just the amount of stress that goes throughout their normal day life without the exercise part. And I think that starts to get people on thinking a little bit more intelligently about, how do I put this all together in a smart way so I'm not just running myself into the ground.
Yeah.
Now, would you say from your clinical experience or some of the stuff you worked with people, is magnesium that low-hanging fruit for most people then? Would you say if you fix that, a lot of stuff gets better?
It is definitely one of my go-to first supplements, because almost everybody that I work with is really, really magnesium depleted. Food is always first, though. That's the main focus. We want to get you. Supplements are supplements, basically, is what I'm trying to say. They're supplemental to a really foundational and awesome food strategy and lifestyle strategy. So, that said, though, magnesium can be definitely low-hanging fruit for a lot of people. Muscle cramps, migraines, you need magnesium to create energy itself. So like, if you're depleted in magnesium, you're not going to be creating energy efficiently. And that's huge, especially for athletes. You want to be creating you want to get as much horsepower as possible. So that's definitely something that most people could easily, start integrating and see benefits from.
How would you know you're low? How would you know if you were low? Like, is it a blood test?
That's a good question too. So most blood tests test serum magnesium, but the difficult part about this is that our blood keeps things very stable, and magnesium is an intracellular mineral, so that means it's inside the cell. So whatever is in your blood is whatever is kind of like leaked out. It's not going to really be an accurate measure of your magnesium. Same thing with potassium and a couple other minerals. These are intracellular minerals, meaning inside the cell. And so, of course, it's going to look, normal because the ranges will probably be really low on the test anyway. But to really get an idea of your magnesium status is to do an HTMA test, which is a hair tissue mineral analysis. And that test, because you're excreting minerals, you're excreting heavy metals as well through your tissues. And so that'll show you exactly how much magnesium you're excreting or your status. You know, it could show you whether or not you're low, whether or not you're excreting it a lot. It depends if you're a slow oxidizer or a fast oxidizer, which you'll also see. And that's really important because magnesium is the antagonist to calcium. And so a lot of people with high blood pressure, very easily, probably magnesium deficient. A lot of people with cramps or PMS or headaches and migraines, they're magnesium deficient because calcium will contract the muscle, magnesium relaxes it. So any kind of like tension, somebody probably needs magnesium.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that up. I just kind of was thinking about patient care for me with rehab. And I sometimes will get very hypermobile athletes, right? Someone who's actually like on that scale of hypermobility syndrome. And we know that they produce collagen differently due to a genetic variance. Like one of the 5 types, one of them is disordered, right? It's laid down differently. So then some of their ligaments and tendons are a little bit stretchier. So they'll have excessive ranges of motion typically in their joints. But when you speak about how people who work out or have a lot of stress or overall stress, they're usually, they're already magnesium deficient, but then they're going to use magnesium even more. I wonder, you start getting me thinking about, they're going to use a lot of energy just to resist gravity a little bit more than someone who has stiffer joints or normal stiffness. And I would bet that if we could measure that test, that would be interesting to see if hypermobility was lower on magnesium because of that.
That's an interesting perspective. I've never thought about it like that. But yeah, that would be
really
interesting.
Because every day they wake up, they have to resist gravity just like we do. But if they're using more and then they do a normal workout, of course they're going to fatigue faster in a CrossFit workout. And that's why I see more potential injuries, I think, with that population, is because they're already stressed, just right?
Yeah,
and they're probably not getting their magnesium dealt with.
Yeah, that could be it. And when you are stressed, it's not just muscle and fat that get broken down; it's tissues as well. So when you're stressed, your thymus, which is one of the most important immune glands that you have, that shrinks. That's like getting eaten alive. Your shoulder joints and tendons will get eaten alive. Your Achilles tendon, that can also get eaten to create energy that you're not giving your body. It's one of the easiest hypothyroidism tests way back 100 years ago used to be an Achilles tendon reflex test. And people with hypothyroidism usually had a compromised Achilles tendon because their body was so stressed, it was catabolically consuming the tendon.
Well, and that's why I'm like, hey, I need some of your expertise when I work with some patients, right, to get their rehab injury better so it can load more in sessions with me. They better have this dialed in, because I can't really maximize their rehab sessions if this isn't dealt with, or at least their lifestyle changes have been altered a little bit so that they're recovering a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, food is going to be really, really important for recovery. Rest and just getting your metabolism normalized will be super big.
Yeah. And then a last question, and then we'll have to wrap up. But if someone wanted to work with you or know how to contact, where would they contact you? Would it be, do you like being on Instagram? Where is the best way to find out more about Innate Nutrition?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm on Instagram pretty actively lately. You can find me at Innate Functional Nutrition. I also have a website where I am also pretty active on. It's innate-nutrition.com. Or you can email me at Loren at innate-nutrition.com. But there's a bunch of ways you can download contact me. I just released a new metabolism health check guide. So, I talked about using your temperatures and pulses as a way to gauge how healthy your metabolism is. I just put that up on my Instagram. I'm working on putting it on my website, but if you wanted to download it for free, it is 100% free. It'll teach you how to interpret your results as well. That's ready to go if you wanted to check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said you had a vitamin D and magnesium series on Instagram too, if they wanted to know more.
Yes, that's on my blog. And I have it's broken out into a series on Instagram. It's a little further back, so you'll probably have to scroll down. But there's all that information that I talked about. I talk about even deeper in that series. If you have any questions about that too, just don't hesitate to reach out. I know vitamin D is kind of, it's a very hot topic, very complicated one as well. I did want to mention too, I do have a $25 coupon for people that would like to work with me as well, if they're interested. It's rehab. And so, I'll give you the information so you can share it with your followers.
This has been an episode of TruStrength Spotlight. I'm your host, Dr. Zach Harmon, and we want to thank you for tuning in to hear our take on helping people get the most out of their health and fitness. We also want to thank again Loren Cruz of Innate Nutrition. You can find her at innate-nutrition.com. And if you want to know more about TruStrength Performance and Rehab, where we help individuals build true strength both in body and mind, go to www.trustrengthrehab.com.